Hello, everyone. Have a great day. Today,
I'll continue the story of Jack and Single Life.
follow more heartwarming love stories.
Jack had attended more banquets than he could remember. Golden tables, crystal glasses, food prepared by chefs whose names alone cost more than most people's yearly income. Meals where laughter was measured, conversations rehearsed, and emotions carefully hidden behind perfect smiles. Yet none of those meals prepared him for this one. The bowl in front of him was small. Inside was plain rice, thin soup made from wild vegetables, and a single piece of fried fish, shared between 3 people. Single Life placed the bowls down carefully, as if afraid the food might disappear if she moved too fast. "Eat while it's warm," she said quietly. Jack stared at the meal. This wasn't poverty in theory. This was poverty in practice. Beethoven climbed onto the low wooden stool, his feet dangling. He picked up his spoon and waited, not touching the food until his mother nodded. Jack noticed. "Why doesn't he start eating?" Jack asked softly. Single Life replied without thinking. "He waits to see if there's enough." Something tightened in Jack's chest. She divided the fish carefully, giving the largest piece to Beethoven, the smallest to herself. Jack watched her hands, steady, practiced, without hesitation. "You don't like fish?" Jack asked. "I do," she answered calmly. "But he needs it more." Jack felt his throat close. They began to eat. The sound of spoons against bowls filled the silence. Beethoven ate slowly, carefully, savoring each bite as if he had learned early that food was not guaranteed. When he finished, he looked up. "Uncle Jack, is it good?" the child asked. Jack tried to answer, but the words wouldn't come. The food tasted familiar. Not the flavor, but the feeling. A warmth that settled deep in his chest, a quiet heaviness behind his eyes. He took another bite, and then it hit him. Without warning, tears welled up. Jack froze. He lowered his head quickly, hoping neither of them noticed. But Single Life saw everything. She said nothing. Jack's hands trembled slightly as he set the spoon down. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice hoarse. "I don't know what's wrong with me." Beethoven tilted his head. "Are you sick?" Jack shook his head, forcing a weak smile. "No, just surprised." Single Life watched him closely. "Food can do that," she said gently. "It reminds people of things they forgot." Jack swallowed hard. "What things?" he asked. She didn't answer. That night, Jack couldn't sleep. The taste of the meal lingered, not on his tongue but in his memory. He lay on the floor, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind brushing against the wooden walls. Then the images came. A small apartment, a cracked table, a woman's voice calling him to eat. He sat up suddenly. His heart pounded. The memory was blurred, incomplete, but the feeling was unmistakable. "This doesn't make sense," he whispered. Jack had grown up surrounded by wealth. That was the story everyone told. Yet his chest ached with the certainty that it wasn't the whole truth. The next morning, Single Life noticed his distraction. "You didn't sleep," she said. "I remembered something," Jack replied. Or, almost remembered. She glanced at him but said nothing. At the market, Jack watched Beethoven carefully count coins before handing them to his mother. "Why does he do that?" Jack asked. Single Life smiled faintly. "He likes to feel useful." Jack nodded slowly. Later, as they walked home, Jack stopped suddenly. "I've eaten food like that before," he said, "when I was very young." Single Life paused. "And?" she asked carefully. "And I don't know where," Jack admitted, "but it felt safe." Single Life looked away. "Memories are tricky." "Do you believe food carries memories?" Jack asked. She nodded. "Some kinds do." That evening, Beethoven fell asleep early. Single Life cleaned the bowls while Jack sat quietly nearby. "Thank you," Jack said suddenly. "For the food?" "For letting me feel human," he replied. Her hands froze for just a second. "You were always human," she said softly. "You just forgot." Jack looked at her, heart pounding. Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance. Far away, in a house filled with light and silence, Jack's mother stared at an old photograph she hadn't looked at in years. A child, a poor woman, a wooden table. Her fingers tightened. "No," she whispered. Back in the mountains, Jack pressed his hand against his chest. That familiar feeling returned, stronger now, as if a door inside him had cracked open, and something long buried was about to come out. Jack woke up with his heart racing. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. Then he smelled it again. Rice, wood smoke, cold mountain air. He lay still on the thin mat, staring at the ceiling as the images from the night before replayed in fragments, too clear to be a dream, too broken to be a memory. A small wooden table, a woman's back, a bowl placed carefully in front of him. And that feeling, warm, safe, aching. Jack pressed his palm against his chest. "What did I forget?" he whispered. Across the room, Single Life was already awake, braiding her hair quietly. She moved slowly, deliberately, as if trying not to disturb something fragile. She noticed his gaze. "You look like someone who didn't come back alone from sleep," she said. Jack hesitated. "Do you ever feel like your body remembers things your mind doesn't?" Her hands paused. "Yes," she answered after a moment. "Usually the painful things." Jack sat up. "Last night, that meal, it felt like coming home." Single Life didn't look at him. "That's dangerous," she said quietly. "Why?" "Because once you remember how something feels," she replied, "you start asking why you lost it." That day, Jack couldn't focus on anything else. He followed Single Life and Beethoven as usual, but his mind kept drifting. Every small detail, the way she rinsed rice 3 times to make it last longer, the way Beethoven folded his hands before eating, the way silence wrapped around them without discomfort, pulled at something deep inside him. At noon, Single Life cooked again. The same food. Jack watched carefully this time. The movements were identical. The order, the pauses, the way she placed the bowls. His breath caught. "My mother used to do that," he said suddenly. Single Life froze. "What?" she asked. "When I was very small," Jack continued, voice low, uncertain. "She used to put food down exactly like that, quietly, as if noise might break something." Single Life turned slowly. "You said you grew up wealthy," she said carefully. "I did," Jack replied. "That's what I was told." Beethoven looked up from his bowl. "Uncle Jack, are you sad again?" Jack forced a smile. "No, just thinking." But inside, the certainty was growing. Something in his life had been edited. That afternoon, Jack walked alone through the village. He stopped at an old wooden house near the edge of the fields. An elderly woman sat outside, peeling vegetables. She looked up at him, squinting. "You're not from here," she said. "No," Jack replied. "But have I ever been?" The woman chuckled softly. "We all pass through places we don't remember." Jack hesitated. "Do you remember a woman who lived here, many years ago, with a child?" The woman studied his face more closely now. "Why do you ask?" "I'm not sure," Jack admitted. She shook her head. "Memories in this village don't disappear. They just stay quiet." Jack felt a chill crawl up his spine. That night, the rain returned again. Single Life cooked in silence. Beethoven ate, then curled up to sleep early. Jack waited until the child's breathing evened out before speaking. "Single Life," he said softly. "Yes?" "Did you grow up here?" She nodded. "Not far." "And before Beethoven?" Her shoulders tensed. "I was younger," she said, "and more foolish." Jack chose his next words carefully. "Did you ever live in the city?" She laughed, short, sharp. "The city never wanted me." "But you've been there," Jack pressed. Single Life turned to face him, eyes guarded. "Why are you asking this?" "Because I think I've eaten your food before," Jack said. A long time ago. The room went very still. That's impossible, she said immediately. Is it? Jack asked. Or just inconvenient? Her jaw tightened. You're imagining things. Then why does it feel so real? Jack demanded quietly. Why does my body recognize this place? Single Life looked away. Some questions don't bring answers, she said. Only pain. Jack stood. I'm not afraid of pain. She finally met his eyes. You should be, she said softly. Later that night, Jack dreamed again. This time the memory came clearer. A woman crying softly at a table, a child's hand reaching for food, a voice saying, "Eat, even if there's not much." Jack woke up gasping. He sat up abruptly and saw Single Life sitting beside Bei Tom, watching him. How long have you been there? He asked. Long enough, she replied. Jack's voice shook. Tell me the truth. Single Life stood slowly. There are truths, she said, that change lives the moment they're spoken. I'm already changed, Jack said. She closed her eyes briefly. Before she could answer, a sound cut through the night. A car engine, low, controlled, expensive. Single Life's blood ran cold. Jack heard it too. He walked to the window. Headlights pierced the darkness at the edge of the village road. Not villagers, not lost travelers, city cars, black, familiar. Jack's phone vibrated in his pocket for the first time in days. A single message. Mother, we need to talk, now. Jack turned slowly toward Single Life. Her face had gone pale. She found you, Single Life whispered. Jack's heart pounded. No, he said quietly. She found us. Outside, footsteps approached, and inside that small wooden house, the past stood on the verge of colliding with the present, carrying answers that could destroy everything Jack had just begun to feel.
Một bữa ăn giản dị đạm bạc được chia sẻ với Single Life và con trai bé Tom bất ngờ phá vỡ lớp vỏ bọc cảm xúc của Jack lần đầu tiên bị CEO quyền lực bật khóc choáng ngợp bởi một cảm giác quen thuộc kỳ lạ hay không. Để giải thích hương vị của cơm trắng và canh đánh thức những mảnh ký ức rời rạc từ một ở tuổi thơ mà anh không bao giờ được phép nhớ lại hình ảnh về chiếc bàn gỗ, những hy sinh thầm lặng và mát ẩn giấu trong mèo có, trong khi Jack bị ám ảnh bởi một cảm giác nhà anh bắt đầu đặt câu hỏi về quá khứ của chính mình và câu chuyện mà anh luôn được kể về sự nuôi dưỡng của mình. Single Life ngày càng cảnh giác, cảm nhận được mối nguy hiểm đằng sau những câu hỏi của anh, trong khi Jack tìm kiếm sự thật. Những thế lực từ thế giới cũ, anh đang đến gần những chiếc xe sang trọng xuất hiện ở ngôi làng miền núi và mẹ anh liên lạc. Sự bình yên mong manh tan vỡ, quá khứ trỗi dậy như giọt thơ bay, những bí mật có thể phá hủy mọi thứ mà Jack đã bắt đầu cảm nhận.